Questions about phase two? Okay, cool. Still bring your computer every day because I'm still gonna not give out paper assignments because we're gonna try and do what we can, but yeah. Okay, so today then we are gonna talk about Atticus's closing speech in the trial. We're gonna do a close reading. So we did one of those before in that conversation between Atticus and Scout. So we're gonna do the same thing with his speech at the end of the trial. So you should click on the assignment that is called close reading. I think it's like Atticus's closing speech on Canvas.
Yeah, it just says close reading 270 to 275.
Okay, cool. So click on that. As you look through, things to look for and to annotate, because remember we use comments to make comments and annotate on the draft. Diddles, right? We went over that like 2 classes ago. If you have forgotten what diddles is, then look at your notes. That's what they're for, right? To relook at that stuff. So it stands again for diction, images, details, language, and syntax, or sentence structure. So if you notice patterns in here, you should be marking that. Or if you notice like he's using the same sentence structure over and over again in a little passage, think about why he does that. Any weird punctuation you notice, go ahead and mark that. Like, oh, that's interesting. Why would he trail off here? I don't know, whatever. Who is involved in this section? How, and in this case it's Atticus speaking. So how's Atticus acting in relation to his normal behavior? How does this section relate to themes in the text? What was a theme again? Who remembers what a theme is? It's all in your notes.
Kind of like a repeated message in a story, a message that the story continually contributes to.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, right. So it's a main idea or concept. It's a lesson that the author wants us to learn throughout the book, right? So love it. So if this is relating to any of the themes, kind of, and you thought of one for last night as part of your reading questions, any themes that you know is going on in the text. Does it bring up any questions? If you have questions, write your questions in the little comments. And then finally, how was the author using ethos, pathos, and logos to develop a point? So that should be like a blurry memory in your mind of a video we posted. Who remembers what those are? Ethos, pathos, logos. Yeah, Connor.
They're all part of the rhetorical triangle that a lot of people who are proposing arguments use to make their argument more credible or relatable or more backed by evidence.
Yeah.
More logical.
Perfect. So who remembers, we'll start with logos, what that means in English and not ancient Greek. Yeah.
Logos is the evidence portion of your argument, which is using evidence to support your claim so that those who appreciate evidence will side with you.
Yeah, right. So this is logic, facts, data, evidence, right? Okay, pathos. Yeah?
That one's the very emotional part where I'm guessing like pathos is like pathology, something like that. Something
Yeah,
like humans
same
and, like,
word.
Yeah, something like the body, the like visceral, something that evokes emotion in a reader.
Yeah, definitely, right? So pathos centers on looking at the beliefs and emotions of the audience and then seeing what you can bring to the table to manipulate that. Now, manipulation sounds like a bad word, right? Like, oh, that sounds like not nice, right? You don't want to manipulate people. But anytime that you're creating an argument or even just talking to someone, you are trying to get a certain response from them or get them to act. Even if you're talking to your friend about, oh my gosh, did you hear about this? You want them to be excited about that, right? And so you're thinking about your audience and how to portray that to tap into their emotional responses or into their beliefs, okay? And then finally, ethos is the weird one. You want to remember that is? Yeah.
It's your credibility. If you're an expert on a subject, you'll have a lot more ethos making a statement about that subject. So like one form of ethos, this is just one way to build up ethos, and it's a more specialized way. But if I'm writing a paper about,
About dinosaurs?
Yes, about dinosaurs,
Okay.
and I cite myself as professor of paleontology, Stanford,
Yeah.
If I, like, sign off as that, then that'll seriously increase my ethos.
Yeah, right? So you're tapping into things that the speaker presents about themselves to appear credible or to build their reputation. So they call it the rhetorical triangle because, again, there's three of them, right? It's not like a real triangle, but there are three ways that you can influence people in an argument. So I wrote these down here just in case you forget it. But yeah, so logical appeal is logos, facts and evidence. Pathos is emotional, and you're thinking about what does your audience care about? What do they believe? How can I tap into that? And then ethos is like, what can I present myself to make them believe me? So like you said, that's a perfect way to build ethos if you're writing the paper. Oftentimes products will have celebrity sponsors, like if you're trying to sell a basketball shoe, you might try to get LeBron James to say that these are good shoes because people are like, well, he's very good at basketball, and now I want those shoes because clearly he knows what he's talking about. And they all help you to contribute to your purpose, right, which is to convince them whenever you're convincing them. So what is Atticus's purpose in this speech? Yeah.
To kind of acquit Tom and
Yeah.
say why he shouldn't be found guilty.
Yeah, right? So he's like, don't convict Tom, he's innocent. Yeah.
I think another point, in his speech that's big on him is, especially later on, after he's gone through the evidence and the open and shut case, especially in his ending, he's kind of trying to convince the people. He knows, he's been saying for a while that he won't be able to succeed on the case.
Yeah.
So, I think one of the biggest parts of his end speech, one of his biggest goals is to, convince the people that this is wrong, that this is, at least make them feel a little bit of remorse with the decision they're making and make them have to discuss it for a little while
Okay.
to make progress towards his eventual goal.
Yeah, right, so he knows going in, we were linked 100 years, right, before we started, and yet he's gonna do his best to at least get the jury to stay out as long as possible on the issue, which usually it's just like, well, he's guilty, like they don't even look at the case facts. Okay, cool, so I'm gonna give you about 20 minutes to go through the speech. I realize that that isn't a ton of time to really dig in, but we just have lots to get through today. So 20 minutes, you can work with someone next to you if you want, or move next to them. If you don't want to be near other humans right now, you can work by yourself, whatever, just either way, don't lick each other, you'll probably be fine. And then we'll talk about it when you guys are done. So if you're working together, just make sure you both are making comments so you have something to turn in, okay? Excellent. Yeah.
So we're just like reading and then going through marking.
Yeah, I would probably mark as I read and it's not just
Yeah.
like, but yeah, so you're just looking, so like at the top of that document are the things that you can look for patterns or ethos, pathos, logos, where he's using that and why. You're just kind of making comments. It's called annotating. Fancy word. Yeah, I think the other half of this class is bigger, in case you were wondering. Well, it'll be exciting. It's like meeting new friends. Okay, so let's talk about what you guys annotated. What decisions did you notice Atticus making to make his speech more convincing? The things that he was doing. Ella, let's start with you. What was something that you found? That you marked?
He talks about how the state shouldn't be able to happen because it's obvious that Tom is innocent.
Okay, so he uses a lot of like a lack of evidence, and as intelligent people, we should be looking for that. So good. What else does he do? Try. Yeah.
Well, I didn't go through all of it, but just one thing I noticed was he kept talking about that what she was doing was unspeakable to society.
Okay. About what Mayella was doing?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and why do you think he talks so much about her? Because like his defendant is Tom, right? So what is he trying to do? Do you have any ideas, Patrick? No. Okay, Connie.
I really noticed, and one thing that I annotated on early on into his speech was that he really brings out, and I think he excellently brought out this theme of she got injured, right? But he doesn't feel any grace or forgiveness for the hypocrisy that essentially, as he goes on, as that white people uphold towards, he really talks about how everybody is equal,
Okay.
but while, people may not be as smart as one another, the court, he brings up that the court is the one place where everything should be equal, and that really, I think while talking about the hypocrisy of racism, he reminds them that they're in a court, a place where everything should be equal, fair, and just, and I think that really gets to the jurors.
Okay.
Like that's his way of getting to the drawers.
Yeah, I mean, I think. Oh yeah, go ahead, Henry.
I really liked the word choice of, this case is as simple as black and white.
Yeah, why do you
I
like
feel like
that?
that was really a very good double meaning, word choice, because,
Yeah.
first you've got the fact that the case is just, it's a very obvious, all the evidence points one way.
Yeah.
But then you've got the fact that the case is as simple as prejudice between black and white people.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he really uses the meta-narrative of, this is an open and shut case, but it all relies on how prejudiced you guys are and how prejudiced the system is.
Yeah. And for those of you listening, if you didn't mark that, I would be marking stuff as people are saying stuff. That's just like good English habits, right? And I think what both Henry and Connor are getting at are, Atticus is very aware of what the opposition is thinking, or people who would be opposed to acquitting Tom Robinson are thinking, right? And so he's thinking, what could their argument be? And what can they do to kind of circumvent that? So one of those arguments, right, is that, well, she's beat up and someone's got to pay for that, right? And he's like, and don't you pity Mayella Ewell? Don't you feel bad for her? And Atticus is saying, of course I feel bad for her. Like, what happened to her was terrible. But I do not think that it is Tom Robinson responsible. And for you to say that he should take the blame completely negates, what the court system does, which is to make everyone equal, right? And so in that way, he sets up like, yes, I do feel bad, but not bad enough to convict an innocent man. And then like what Henry said, says this case is as simple as black and white. Now, if he comes out and says, you guys are being racist and you need to acquit Tom, how is that gonna go over?
He'd probably lose his license even though he wouldn't.
Yeah.
Even though he didn't actually do anything wrong, they would just hate him so much for calling them out on their hypocrisy and their racism that
Yeah.
they'd disbar him.
Or they would even, kind of like Alexandra has said, like, you're embarrassing us. Like, why do you even care about this? It doesn't matter. Like, you know what? Like, this is just the way things are, right? And so either he's not gonna get business, they're gonna be offended, they're gonna feel like, what the crap are you doing? Like, this is just how it is down here, and you're trying to pretend what, like your son abolitionist, right? And that was like a bad term to them, basically. Although, I mean, segregation, there are people actually trying to abolish slavery anymore because slavery is gone. But the same thing, like, oh, so you're sympathetic? And yet, by saying this case is as simple as black and white, he's not calling them out racist, right? He hits them in the conscience because they're like, ugh, this is about race, you know, like I realize that. And yet he doesn't flat out call them racist. And so he's able to prick their conscience without offending and completely alienating his jury, which I think is a great reason to use that particular double meaning, right? Anything else you guys noticed as you were annotating? Yeah.
It's a very good closing speech.
You just
Yeah,
overall.
I was
If
thinking.
I was a lawyer, then I would want that to be my closing.
Exactly, I think probably both of us are thinking the same thing, that this is when you look at how a closing statement should be constructed, this is the epitome.
Yeah, and besides what we said, is there anything else that like contributes to that? What do you think, Carmen?
Well, talking about all of how he's really hitting them in the conscience, like you said, at the very end he says, in the name of God, do your duty. And this is a very Christian community. This is a very God-fearing community. And so bringing up God as part of his argument, I think maybe contributes to this whole thing about, if you guys want to be so moral, then acquit him.
Yeah, and which side of the rhetorical triangle do you think that relies on? If he's bringing up God.
Probably a lot on, like, pathos.
Okay, yeah, because it's a belief, right, that they hold, and he taps into that. Yeah, and
Also, this is less of a literary analysis statement, but it's a very organized argument. It's very much something that feels like it was put together very soundly, rather than it's just a bunch of facts listed off the top of his head. It's very, very well organized.
yeah.
Proceeding through different points in a logical way.
Totally, and I think, you know, he's very aware of that, and you say that that's not very literary, and yet organization is crucial to argument, because you want to help your audience move with you through these points in a way that is the most convincing. And unfortunately, I think in school, we don't have a ton of time together for me to, you know, really focus on that as much as I would like to. We're like, okay, here are the parts of a paragraph, like, do you have them, right? But when you get to be a better writer and arguer, you're going to be thinking about, okay, what point do I want to put first? Why do I put it there? Well, because it's foundational for this next point that I'll make, or because it gets them like open to listening to me, right? Like in your intro, you're trying to convince them that you're worth listening to, right? And I think he does a good job with starting with Mayella and kind of like this elephant in the room that like, don't you care about what she suffered? And he starts there, and then he gets in kind of some of the more heavy stuff, like there's no evidence, you guys can't do this, you're being racist, without saying you're being racist, and then finally bringing it back to their beliefs. So his organization is really outstanding. Okay, thinking about the rhetorical triangle, which side of the rhetorical triangle do you think he relies most heavily upon? How many of you would say that he relies most heavily upon ethos? Okay, what about pathos? So the emotional component. What about logos? Okay, Spencer Madsen, what do you think?
About that last sentence?
About like the ethos, pathos, logos, which one do you think that he relies most heavily on?
I think he sort of relies on, what's the one with the, where, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. So
I'm
there's
just
emotion,
having
logic, and then reputation.
reputation.
Okay, why?
Everyone in the town sort of knows him as a lawyer.
Okay.
And he's been doing this for a very long time. So if you're gonna hire him as a lawyer, you would believe that everyone in the community would trust him as a lawyer, even if they don't trust who he's defending.
Okay, and I think that there are arguments for that, right? Like Judge Taylor picks him specifically for that reason. And so, you know, outside of the speech, I would say that he does rely heavily on ethos. Henry?
I feel like he does have a lot of logos in his speech to back up his points, so no one can look at his argument and be like, oh, you've just said a lot of words, none of them have any evidence to back them up.
Yeah.
But he was primarily leaning on pathos because even if he gives an open and shut evidence case, as he stated before, no one will care because of the racial prejudice. So he's trying to break down the racial prejudice with pathos.
Okay, yeah, and I think I would agree that those two kind of are working together here, because he is applying evidence, right? But why is he applying that? So that he can break through their beliefs and their emotional attachment to convicting him, so that, like, you know, like they're racist or whatever stuff can stand. Okay, normally we would talk a lot longer about this, but if you are done, you can turn that in. We're going to talk about literary foils now. So open your Term 2 Writer's Notebook, and there's just a few notes that we're going to take on this. This will be number 4 in your Term 2 notebook. And if you can make it clear where your entries start, that makes it easier for me. Because it was super fun playing scavenger hunt with your last notebooks. Okay. So a foil definition. In fiction, a foil is a character who contrasts with another character, usually the protagonist, but not always. And the ones that we'll talk about from To Kill a Mockingbird are not the protagonist, because who's the protagonist in To Kill a Mockingbird?
Yeah.
Scout, right? She's like your main character, right? To highlight, and then why they are is to highlight particular qualities of the other character. So I have some example foils for you up here. On the left hand side of the screen, who do we have?
Joy and sadness?
Yes, joy and sadness from Inside Out. What is joy like? Yes.
Happy.
Happy, right? And to the point of ignoring other feelings and sometimes being almost fake, right? But she's very, like, everything's happy all the time. Then you've got sadness. She reminds me a little bit of Eeyore, right? She can make any situation depressing, right? Now, when you're looking at foils, you want to look at characters that are similar in enough respects that you can make a comparison there and it makes sense, right? So they're both similar in that they're both emotions, right? They're both in Riley's head. But what makes them a foil is that contrasting part, right? So they're both emotions and yet they are the polar opposites of each other. And why the author does this is we see by looking at their interplay. Now when Joy is fake and she pretends that everything is fine, Riley actually misses out on the opportunity to deal with hard things, right? And she's not emotionally healthy if she's just faking happy. And so we find out by the end that, you know, sadness is important because she allows us to cope and move past hard things and to be an emotionally healthy person, right? And so the contrasting of the two helps to bring out that fact of life, right? On this side, we have Spock and Captain Kirk. What is Spock like? Does anyone know?
Very smart, calculated,
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
but does not take risks.
Yeah, right. He just what did the stats say? Okay, we will do that, right? Kirk, on the other hand, what is he like?
He's much more like expeditionary. He's very willing to take risks,
Risk-taking.
and sometimes he might do things that are kind of stupid because they're in an effort to do the best thing or have the most reward. High risk, high reward. Whereas Spock is kind of low risk.
But consistent reward.
Yeah.
Right, yeah, so he works a lot more with his head, he works a lot more with his gut, right? He's like, listen, I'm gonna do this because I think that we can fix, you're saying that there is no possible chance, but I do not accept that because emotionally I can't, right? Now, again, we can compare them, they are a good foil because they both work in the Federation together, right? And in like the newer ones, they're like, almost like co-captains, it feels like, right? But we see this interplay and this beating of their heads against each other and learn that, you know, you need both, right? You can't just like march out into the middle of nowhere all the time and like do crazy things and expect to be okay every time. And so Spock's knowledge and his logic really help to temper Kirk. But also, if we just work with logic and that we don't consider any feeling, we lose a part of our humanity in that way, right? And he seems very cold and calculating because he's not considering the human aspect of things, like, well, those are actual people dying that I'm willing to sacrifice, right? Whereas Kirk is like, those are actual people. We've got to think of something else that isn't the most logical, right? And so we learn that you need both in order to be like an effective leader and just like human, right? So, why do authors use foils? Well, their purpose is to deepen the complexity of the characters. So write these down. It's pretty short, but they help to deepen the complexity of characters. We probably wouldn't think as deeply about characters and their motives for things, or their why they are the way they are, if we didn't have these contrasting characters to highlight those aspects. They point out important character traits, so things that the author values often can be highlighted by that foil. And they also help develop themes, right? So looking at that contrast, you can often figure out by the end and how that foil plays out. Oh, the author thinks this about those attributes. If you're only this way, then this effect, right? So you can kind of figure out things that way too. This is a helpful-ish video. It thinks that it's very funny. It isn't, but that's okay.
What is a foil? A la Schmoke. There are dozens of roles for a fictional character to fit into. Some of them can be pretty easy to spot. The protagonist and antagonist are often the hero and the villain, for example. And the sidekick is the one who never gets any of the glory. Thank you, Robin. But others are more difficult to spot, and not because they insist on wearing camo all the time. One of the most ambiguous literary roles is the foil. How do you identify the foil in a novel? If the Summer Olympics are coming up, a foil is the little vending device people poke their combatants with while wearing colanders on their faces. Or it's something you wrap your baked potatoes in. Or it's a math method for multiplication, meaning first, outside, inside, last. Well, we have a guide on that one too. But we're focused on literature, where a foil is a character whose main purpose is to offer a contrast to another character, usually the protagonist. Foils set off and accentuate the main character and are convenient ways to complicate and deepen the characterization of the protagonist. They're more like complementary colors than total opposites. Foils are the white spaces to the protagonist's pen ink drawing, the blush to their cheekbones, the frosting to their cupcake. Basically, everything the foil is, the protagonist is not. The foil's differences highlight the key qualities of the main character. Sure, it can be as simple as protagonist versus antagonist. Voldemort's villainy and selfishness reminds us how good Harry Potter is, and how much he values his friends. A foil is any character who makes the traits of another stand out in sharp contrast. For instance, a character's best friend can be a foil if she's always volunteering time at a charity and giving sandwiches and blankets to homeless people, reminding us that, despite saving that turtle from a burning house, our protagonist is actually pretty darn selfish. There can be multiple foils in a novel as well. In Romeo and Juliet, Romeo's first love, Rosalind, is a foil to Juliet, and Juliet's other suitor, Paris, is a foil to Romeo. Finally, a character can even foil himself. In Return of the King, Frodo can be his own worst enemy, and his bad side makes his good side even, gooder by comparison. So, a foil isn't just a handy suntanning aid, it's a way for an author to make their characters even deeper. So, when you're hunting for the foil, remember the following. The foil is often the person who enhances the protagonist's attributes, but the foil isn't necessarily the antagonist. It could be a friend or a rival. And supporting characters might have foils too. Score one for the little guys.
Okay, so that's kind of like a helpful, quick explanation of foil. Often they don't have to be, it says in there, the only part I don't like is that it says that everything the foil is, like the main character is not, right? Or everything your character is, the foil is not. There is stark contrast there, but it's not like everything has to be opposite, right? But there should be enough commonality that you're like, oh, I see that they're trying to draw that comparison and make me think about how those are alike and different. But there's a stark contrast somewhere that highlights an important thing that the author's trying to get across. So, in To Kill a Mockingbird, and this is on your overview and in your assignments, we're gonna look at two different sets of foils in To Kill a Mockingbird. So it's called foils in TCAM. Okay.
Today, 5th or 4th?
It is the 5th, so I feel like every day feels like the same day. Okay, so the two foils that we're gonna look at are the foil between Tom Robinson and Tim Johnson. I told you they would come back. And then a foil between Alexandra and Calpurnia. We're only gonna have time to do one together, so which one do you guys wanna do? Tim and Tom or Alexandra and Tom? Okay. Tim and Tom. So the way that I like to think about foils, and so we're gonna do this one together, you'll do the next one, and then you'll pick one of the two. You don't have to pick both of them, but you'll write an 8-sentence paragraph that talks about what the purpose of the foil is and why you know that. So what evidence do you have to prove that that's why the author included this foil? So I like to start out with like what they have in common, because often you can look at what they have in common and then see how they manifest that thing differently or how that thing is different, and that can help you to figure out why the author's doing that, because I think those differences are what they're trying to point out about that situation. So what do both Tim and Tom have in common? You can just raise your hands, yeah.
Neither of them are considered to be the highest class of society.
Okay, yeah. They are both low class, and not really all that valued, right? Although, thinking about the two, how does the town feel about Tim?
Like-
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
He's that neighbor dog that you know, maybe once in a while you run into him and you kind of like the dog. You don't care about it that much, but when you see it, you're like, oh, that's a nice dog.
Yeah, right. He's kind of the town dog, I think she says at one point, right? And so they all like him. It's not like he's like this crazy important part of their town, but they generally like him. So town dog generally well liked. Now thinking about Tom, how does the town think of Tom? Yes.
You know, he's kind of an evil person who attacked a white person.
Yeah, so they ignored him until all of a sudden he's on their scene, and then they think he's evil. So ignored, and then thought of as evil and dangerous, right? After accused. And I'm just kind of writing notes, so these aren't quite complete sentences, but that's okay. I'm just making like bullet points. Okay, in what other ways are they alike? This dog and this man. Yeah.
They're both eventually thought of as needing to be taken away from society. They both need to be isolated, or in the case of Tim so far, well, who's killed,
Yeah.
who's shot.
Right? And who else was shot? We know that is point. So both are shot, right? So
Yeah.
you could say they're both like dangerous and need to be removed from society. And they're both killed, specifically shot. They are both shot. Okay, so let's talk about how those things are manifested differently. So why is Tim Johnson dangerous?
He had rabies.
Yeah, so dangerous because he has rabies. Okay, why is Tom dangerous?
Because he was accused of. Exactly.
Yeah, he's accused of rape, and yet he didn't even do anything, right? So he's dangerous, but everybody knows it's bogus, which is messed up. So, dangerous, rapist, but this is fake. And everyone knows it. Like, there's not a single person who doesn't know that. Okay, what is the difference in the way that they're shot? Yeah.
One was taken out with a one-hit wonder.
Yeah.
Kind of just shot in the head. The other one was shot 17 times.
And which one was shot 17 times?
Tom.
The person, right?
Exactly.
they are more merciful in their killing of this dog than a human being, right? So, shot once, it's like a mercy killing.
Exactly.
Because he's not, we're gonna recover from rabies at that point, he's going to die or need to be put down.
There's
right?
more merciful ways of killing a dog though than shooting.
In the brain?
I guess, I mean, we're assuming that he shot, but you're probably right, they're probably, I don't know, I don't think that they have like the little shots like that we do at our vet now. But, yeah. But as far as like their immediate situation, that was probably the most merciful thing they could have done for that dog, is just, because they have Atticus do it, right, not Heck, because Heck would miss, and it caused pain to the dog. Then this way he just was dead, right? But you're right, today we wouldn't do that, because that's not kind.
It's a waste of food.
Shot 17 times.
It's a waste of 16.
Does it take 17 times to kill someone?
Depends on who the person
Yeah.
is.
Takes where he hit too, but usually.
If you're, Blackbeard, then yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know how many times you
Or-
shot,
So,
it's like ridiculous.
seems overkill, right? It seems like there might have been some anger associated there, this man who had the audaciousness to run away, right? Anything else you wanna say about how they're alike, how they're different?
You know, I find it kind of sad that they viewed Tom, almost, I kind of thought that they viewed him as lower than a dog with rabies, a rabid
Yeah.
dog.
And I think that that's gonna be something important when we're talking about the purpose of this foil. I think the last thing I would add, and since we're running out of time, I will just tell you, their names are very similar, right? She could have named the dog Spike, or Fido, or Fluffy, but she doesn't. She names him Tim Johnson, so that we see that comparison and make that comparison, right? So, names are eerily similar. Okay, so now I'm just gonna write a brief note to myself under both about the purpose of this, so that when I'm done with my other foil, I can decide which one I wanna talk about. So I'm gonna say, Harper Lee creates this foil, and why do you think she creates it? I think Connor started to get at it. Looking at their treatment of both. What do we learn? Spencer W., why do you think that they would compare these
I have
two?
no idea.
No idea? Okay. Yeah, Connor.
Maybe to establish the perspective of how black people were viewed back then.
Yeah, yeah. Which one is treated better? The dog. And that's a sad statement. They're willing to be kinder to this dog who literally is a danger and will kill people if he bites them than this innocent blind man who's done nothing to harm anyone. So does that make some sort of sense? Yeah. So it creates this foil to show the evil, I guess, nature of racism and how this town is more willing to treat a dog mercifully. Who will kill them with rabies than an innocent black man. Okay, so then when I write my paragraph, I would kind of pull from that purpose and then say this shows, and like, and put evidence to why I think that, okay? So you're gonna do the same thing, you're gonna have to do that at home with Alexandra and Calpurnia. So I would just kind of start with what you think that they have in common, and then how that's manifested differently, and then why have a foil between these characters? What attributes does it highlight? What themes could it be bringing up? So just kind of like this one, even though it doesn't say racism was so bad in this town that they treated this dog nicer, by putting those next to each other, we see that. And then when you're done at the bottom, it says paragraph, so you just choose one of those two and write an 8-sentence paragraph, just right here, analyzing why you think Harper Lee foils these two characters, be specific, and use evidence from the text to support that, okay? Questions on that? Okay, the last thing that you're gonna do for homework, you're gonna finish the book. It's a lot shorter this week because you have shorter turnaround time. Because I see you again on Tuesday, so that's a few days sooner. And then you only have 3 reading questions, okay? So you'll go through those reading questions, they're on Canvas. And then pick your term 2 choice book. It can be nonfiction, or if you're in the AP Human Geography and I think she's making you do historical fiction, it felt a little mean to make you do 2. So if you pick a historical fiction book from that, and it's at least 200 pages, then you could use it for this class too, even though it's not actually true. So just have that picked and submitted, the name, by the 19th. If you want to borrow any of the books, just let me know which one you want to borrow and I'll write your name down, and you can. Yeah,
Can I borrow the blind side?
yeah. And I actually have another copy of that if you want.
Thank you.
Okay, any questions about your work for this week? All right, thanks. I will give you some paper towels. Again, if you hate the hand sanitizer here, bring your own, because they're gonna start ramping up on using that on your way in and out. Since we're not gonna be able to social distance. Yeah. Yeah. It's like your brother James, and I was like, oh no. I'm sure you've turned to dollars.
Yep, and many other people.
How did you have those big people when they went through all my siblings' names and then to the dogs, they were like,
People voted for I mean, it's not like Utah like 4,000 something people voted for Kanye West.
See, someday,
So I'm trying to like.
all right, guys, have a great weekend.